Good morning. My name is John Galaska, PsyD student at CalSouthern University, and I'm taking the option to upload a video to discuss my doctoral project for the first doctoral course. My topic involves intersubjectivity between the caregiver and the infant and some physiological parameters that have been measured on both sides of that dyad. Intersubjectivity is basically what takes place when two people meet and try to determine what's going on in the other person's mind. It involves what's called theory of mind. When I look at you and you look at me, my unconscious looks at your facial expression, hears your prosody of voice, perhaps there's some touch involved, and my mirror neurons then create a impression of what I would be feeling if I were expressing these same things to you. This all happens lightning quick. And this it forms theory of mind about what I suspect is going on in your mind. So that is what intersubjectivity is. It's a pretty fancy word for just trying to know what's going on in somebody else's head. But we do it all the time, and especially of concern with our clients and with our loved ones as well, and with everyone we meet. So I want to study intersubjectivity between the caregiver and the infant. The research that's already been done about that. I don't intend to do any novel research in the in the hospital with infants and caregivers. There has been a lot of research concerning the infant caregiver dyad, measuring physiological parameters before an intervention and after. The physiological parameters that I'm most concerned with are heart rate variability and EEG patterns. Heart rate variability is basically what happens in the beat-to-beat changes in the rate of your heartbeat. When you inhale, your heartbeat goes up, and when you exhale, your heartbeat goes down. Normally, during everyday normal life, if it's looked at on a graph, it is a very jagged kind of thing, seeing some ups and downs, but with lots of little up and down jags and jigs along the way. However, under certain circumstances, this heart rate variability can become a very nice sinusoidal wave with a smooth rise and a smooth fall. Of significance to my study is the fact that there are beneficial health aspects to increasing the high frequency end and the low frequency value, thereby increasing the peak-to-peak difference in intervals of the rise and the fall. That's called an increase in HRV, or an increase in heart rate variability. And there is significant research that documents the benefits of an increase in heart rate variability. It's also sometimes called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, RSA, for those of you who might be in the nursing field or medical doctors. EEG patterns are the patterns that can be measured at the scalp. These measurements made at the scalp are of electrical potentials that are extremely small. The brain doesn't generate a whole lot of electricity, not like people's vibrant personalities exploding on the scene with humor, or all the rest of the vibrant kinds of aspects of interpersonal interaction. Compared to that, the electrical activity in the brain is pretty tame. It's measured in millivolts, millionths of a volt, and it has to be measured through the, you got to get the electrodes pasted down below the hair. You have to find an opening there to the scalp, and you're measuring, of course, through the scalp, through the meninges, through the skull, and all of the fluid that's in between. So it's a very sensitive amplifier, and it's a very tenuous electrical connection. No electricity goes in through EEG in traditional EEG work. there is some EEG work that involves a small amount of electricity, lens therapy that actually feeds some electrical energy into the brain through the electrodes. But what I'm working with does not. It's traditional neurofeedback. So there have been interventions with infants and caregivers wherein both heart rate variability and EEG patterns, singly or in combination, have been measured pre and post. Now, here's what I would like to do. I would like to find out in the research here, are there correlates in the HRV and EEG patterns for attachment behaviors? Louis Cosolino has expressed, delineated the language of attachment. It's prosody of voice, facial expression, and tactile touch. This is the language of attachment. And I want to look at attachment behaviors between caregivers and infants and the kinds of things that were done in the interventions that are in the literature to see what has happened pre and post HRV and EEG, and try to come up with some theoretical applications for HRV and EEG with adults with attachment disorders. So when you get right down to it, the topic for my doctoral project is a mouthful. It's intersubjectivity in the infant caregiver dyad, especially examining the existing research on pre and post intervention EEG and HRV, with the idea of developing theoretical implications for the use of these biofeedback modalities with adults with attachment disorders. So that's I'm going to have to abbreviate that topic somehow. What is the social value of this? Well, according to Mary Ainsworth, with her fantastic foundational study on attachment with 2,000 subjects in the United States, approximately 60% of people emerge with a secure attachment from childhood. The other 40%, some form of insecure attachment, either anxious avoidant or disorganized or whatever. If adults with insecure attachment have disheveled interpersonal relationships, there are transgenerational consequences because attachment style tends to be passed on to children. There's an awful lot of unhappiness that is associated with insecure attachment. So therapies that attempt to facilitate the formation of earned autonomy, as secure attachment is referred to when it is achieved post-childhood, have the possibility of ameliorating quite an awful lot of social discomfort and unhappiness. So that is my hope to find that. Now, interestingly enough, I've already found something that has to do, that has implications for therapy with adults with attachment disorder. I read a study, and I'm afraid I don't have the reference for you here on this video, but it was called Kangaroo Care with Maternal Singing. Now, kangaroo care is the procedure of taking neonatal preterm infants out of the incubator, placing them on the mother's chest with skin-to-skin contact. And then they're covered, of course, with a blanket and a gown. In this study, the infant's ear was placed upon the mother's chest, and the mother would sing to the baby. And of course, the vibrations from the chest are going through the tympanic membrane and the auditory canal of the baby, whose head is against the mother's chest in skin-to-skin contact, but also through the ear in the normal transmission of sound waves. Most of the time, the infants are asleep, by the way, when they do this. And in this study, there were beneficial changes both pre and post in heart rate variability that was measured in a rather novel way. And I will have to discuss in my paper some of the different kinds of methods that are used with infants for estimating and measuring heart rate variability changes. EEG changes are relatively straightforward, but HRV is a little bit more complex with infants. I did find a study that compares 3 methods of obtaining HRV measurements in infants, and so that, of course, will be a part of my project as well. All right, so this maternal skin-to-skin contact and singing had beneficial effects. All right, now I've heard of a hypnotherapist who is doing something very similar, and I had thought about proposing this as well. In this therapy, a person finds a surrogate, someone they love, who cradles their head on their chest during the time that therapy is proceeding. And this is supposed to imitate the infant-caregiver relationship, and perhaps will be beneficial for the person whose head is cradled upon the surrogate they have brought with them to therapy, um, to improve their attachment. So I'm very interested, and I'm going to try this myself. I have someone who's going to be my surrogate mother, and I will place my head upon that person's chest as I go through the therapeutic procedure. Now, for someone like me who emerged from childhood with insecure attachment, my mother was a wonderful person. She did exactly what she was told to do. She was one of 12 children. She believed children should be seen and not heard. And so she never picked me up out of the crib when I was crying, and she told me this. She sort of lamented it a bit. She said that, you know, your cousin actually picks the kids up when they cry and cuddles them. And, you know, I think that her way of raising the children may have been a little bit better than mine. And my mother's a wonderful, generous person. But I did emerge from childhood with insecure attachment, always looking for approval. You could say that this doctoral project is another means of looking for approval. Okay, tell me I'm okay. All right, so I emerged from childhood with this need for approval, especially from women, and that's not a healthy way to live, flirting with every young thing that walks along saying, tell me I'm okay, tell me I'm okay. Thankfully, I have had some wonderful therapists who have, number one, alerted me to the fact of what was going on in my unconscious, that led to these kind of behaviors and this needy kind of way of being with people. It has been wonderful to have had those therapeutic experiences. And every now and then I'll find myself talking to some pretty young thing and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, you know, tell me I'm okay, tell me I'm okay. And then I just separate myself from the situation a little bit and say, look at what you're doing. What is this? Do you really need this person's approval like that? And I said, no, of course not. This is the residue of what has happened because of how I was raised and the implicit social templates that were inculcated in me as a result of my childhood, way before the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex came online, offering me a narrative about the possibility of a narrative about what had happened. But now through therapy, I've created a narrative for what that is, and I understand that behavior. And so I'm much, 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 much more secure. I feel like I have earned autonomy. Every now and then things slip a little bit, but I'm able to bring it back through the use of a narrative that invokes the utility of the prefrontal cortex. Anyway, what significance will these therapeutic implications have for therapy with adults with attachment disorders? Also, Bessel van der Kolk has, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, has suggested a DSM diagnosis of developmental disorder, which of course was nixed. They didn't go for that at all. But Bessel, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, talks, of course, about trauma and also developmental uh, um, developmental disorders that have led to insecure attachment. It is possible that the theoretical implications that I may find, I think I've already found one, that I may find will also be useful for trauma. That's my hope. So that's what I'm trying to get out of this whole thing. That's my topic. What I intend to do is look at the research that's already been done. My initial database search on HRV and EEG in infants and caregivers yielded 179 articles, which is nice. It's not too small, but it's certainly not too big. This is not a very discussed field. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to offer something novel to the field of subjective well-being with this project, and I'm really looking forward to doing it. I am truly excited about it. And I wish well to all of you who are in this similar journey, and perhaps we can make some exchanges on the forum. And I also hope to meet Daniel, Dr. Dan, perhaps in person. I'm only about an hour and a half north of UCLA. So, you guys, Godspeed. Take care.